Welcome everyone to this month's Clarifai Research Seminar, where we are very pleased to welcome Lukas Picek. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Excellent. Who is going to be talking about mapping bio. He's a postdoctoral researcher at INRIA in France, and shortly going to be a Fulbright visiting scholar at MIT. So we're very lucky to have him. He's going to be talking about mapping biodiversity at very high resolution in Europe. Um, one One thing I should mention is that if the way the Zoom is set up, if any of the people in the audience want to talk, they have to be given permission first. So, Lucas, would you prefer people interrupt you with questions or save them to the end?
I don't mind. I don't mind either way. So, what do you
Okay.
prefer? How do you usually do it?
We usually ask the speaker.
Yeah,
uh,
just go ahead. If you want, you can. If you can be a moderator and noticing people raising hands, that would be super
that
nice.
that's my job. I will. I will. So if anyone has any questions, please either post them in the chat or raise your hand, and I will bring them to Lucas's attention. So yeah, thank you very much, and yeah, Lucas, take it away.
Awesome, awesome. As was mentioned, I'm Lucas, and I'm gonna tell you how we are making maps and for biodiversity indicators to track how the biodiversity in Europe is and how it's maybe gonna develop. I do have a little intro for myself as well. So I'm postdoc at INRIA. I'm gonna visit MIT next year, but I'm also sitting in Czech Republic at the small university where I'm like a senior researcher. What I do, apart from what I'm gonna talk about, is a species classification. It's a part of the species distribution modeling as well. But in this case, I do few-shot, OpenSet, multimodal, lifelong learning, anything you can imagine. I also work a lot on individual animal identification. We have built some interesting frameworks and methods and tools. And yeah, last but not least, species and habitat distribution modeling, which is actually the topic of this talk. I do not work alone. There is a bunch of people in our lab. I'm part of something called PlantNet team. If you don't know what's the PlantNet, I will tell you soon. There is a lot of folks. We are transdisciplinary. We have students, we have botanists, we have ecologists, plant scientists, front and back end developers. It's a relatively big team. The PlantNet is a citizen science platform for plant recognition and plant disease recognition. We do have around 30 million users. We open source the data, and the users and the data comes from majority of the country all around the globe. What would be the use, or what is the use? Yeah, we have both, let's say, the citizen science slash personal usage, as well as the professionals use it for either ecology or agriculture and those kind of things. That brings me to the outline of the presentation. So for the first part, or in the first part, I will tell you, give you an overview of how we do the mapping. I will give you the demo after of the app. And if there is a time, and I hope there is a time, we will go into the how we train the models, how we infer the models, and how we get the data, and what's the data, and what is within the data, basically. So, without further ado, let's move. So, what we do, we are trying to make a European scale maps at high resolution. For us, the high resolution means 50 meters. In other words, for every 50 meters square, we are predicting what is supposed to be there. It is not an interpolation. It's more or less an extrapolation problem, because we are trying to also predict the species presence and the habitat, coverage outside of the recorded observations. Why we do it? From my perspective, to understand the dynamics of the biodiversity is important, and we need some tools to detect the species shift range or range shifts, and we want to monitor it right in the future and kind of get some info for the conservation decisions or the policymakers, basically. The methodology at glance. So we do have two models, and we do have a huge data set. So the two models are something which is called deep-SDM and deep-HDM. In both cases, it's a neural network, one for species distribution modeling and the other one for habitat distribution modeling. We feed the first model with a ton of environmental variables, satellite data, and observations of those species. And feeding it, we can produce the maps already for each of the species we cover. At this point, it's around 10,000 species, but we are working on a version 2, which is around like 15 species or 15,000 species already. With the outcoming or species assemblages that are predicted, which should be this part. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but hopefully yes. We can already feed it into the deep-HDM, and it's feeded. And yeah, with the species assemblages, we can predict the habitats, because there is a kind of causality between how the species assemblages is in the place and what is the habitat. Little more about the data sets. We do have around 5 million presence only data. Presence only means it's opportunistic. Those are the data from the PlantNet app. So people are exploring the world, and they are taking photos of species, and then once verified by botanists, we can use it for training. The issue with the presence only data is that we do not have information about other species present at that location, and at the same time, species not presented or not available or around at that location. To balance that, we do have something which is called presence-absence data. Those are extremely valuable as they are time-consuming to get. We do have around 100,000 of those, and what is the presence-absence data look like? Imagine a botanist would make a 1 meter square frame. He would put it on the ground, and then he would spend the whole day, kind of looking under each leaf and trying to have exhaustive search and survey of what is present and what is not. We took just a relatively small part for testing and majority for training, and at the same time, for each of the locations of those species occurrences, we get and gather data from Sentinel-2, from Landsat. We do have something like 20 plus years of the Landsat data. We also get data for participation, temperature, and so on, and a ton of other environmental rasters. That brings us to the SDM. The SDM, in this case, since we need to predict for the whole Europe, should be relatively straightforward and lightweight. Therefore, we opt to use custom architecture, which we called ResNet 6, that is processing each modality separate. For the version I'm gonna show you later, and I'm talking about at the moment, we use 3 branches for 3 different modalities. We do have satellite data from the Sentinel-2, RGB and NIR. So it's 4-band image basically. We then also use climatic cubes that are just made out of the time series. It's 19 years of 12 months times 4 values, which is like temperature, participation, and so on. And the time series from Landsat we also form in such cube that is further processed by or encoded by the ResNet. We just do a simple concatenation. We predict the assemblages, and with the assemblages, we can already prompt the LLM, which is a plant bird model. The plant bird model is basically just the encoder part where we encode the species, or it's pseudo-species assemblages, right? Because we don't have the exhaustive, or majority of the data of the training data is not exhaustive. So we are supposed to encode from what we get, what is missing, and then to use it for classification. I'll tell you a little more about the insights later in the talk. So with this little pipeline, relatively small models, let's say, we can already predict for each of the 50-meter cells, or on the 50-meter square grid, around 10,000 plant species, 7 biodiversity indicators, and around 200 habitat types. For each of the countries, and at the same time for the whole Europe, we gave reports. The first report, which is the A, is a general info about what is the most common species, how many endangered or critically endangered species are there, how many are there in total, what is their coverage. We also provide the species indicators, which is the C, and what are the available or present habitats. If you don't have any question for now, I'll just move to the demo part. And so, is there anyone with a question?
While we wait for others to respond, I do have a few questions. How did you pick the size of the Sentinel chips to use?
Okay, so good question. Good question. Empirically, let's say. We started from larger ones, and we get smaller and smaller. You can imagine the reason to make the inference speed as fast as possible. We are now at 32 times 32, but there is not much difference from 64 times 64, or 128 or 1280. But it's 300 meters, 600 meters, 1 kilometer radius, let's say. And for the species prediction, that's already sufficient to see the context at least 300 meters. You can imagine, right? Like, if there is a building, if there is a sea, if there is something around, you have already an idea from 300 meters.
And another question, you may have covered this, but I got distracted for a second. How are you training with the presence only data? Like what actual loss function are you using?
Yeah, I'll get there.
Okay.
It's BCE. It's BCE. I do have a lot of insights from the training further in the presentation, but yeah, we will get there.
Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, yeah. Yeah.
It's no other questions.
All right.
So I'll just move to other app. Can you just confirm you can see it?
Yep.
Cool. So it's fully interactive. Anyone can access it right now. It's publicly available. On this European level, you can zoom in more or less into the void, let's say, and see what is there. Oh, wait. Did you all just open it? Yeah, it's working now. Cool. And you can go to the 50 meters basically. What I would like to showcase is the, let's say, country or state level. Let's say we go for France. So right away you can see what is the general use case. We have, 3 critically endangered species, 4 endangered. We have some top 3 species here. We know there is around 400 invasive species. We kind of know that there is 253 species and 28 habitats. If I would select the most common species, you will get something like a heat map of the presence, let's say. The more yellowish means higher chance to see it. If I would go anyway to the critically endangered species, that would be much more interesting. So you would just see that this one, the green ash, is like relatively endangered and, just present or available in those locations. What is interesting is that if you would zoom a little in to see where it is, and you would check this little box, which shows you the training data, you will see that there are none around, right? There are literally none around this location. There is probably just like one in France, let's say. But what you might notice already is here is a river, and a little bit further on that same river, you already can see some observations, right? So the extrapolation kinds of work in this case, right, where the spread of the species around one river is kind of expected. If I would draw the map for the Germany, we will find the same species here as well, just probably not critically endangered, but just vulnerable. If we check for habitats, we can go N. Oh, wait. I'll just remove this one. The N habitat is usually a coastal, right? So if I would select the coastal habitat, you can see that, yeah, makes sense, right? The predictions are around the sea. We can probably zoom in a little bit more in this case, right here, where you can see it's, yeah, around the sea. The other thing we can do is to check for the indicators. Wait, I'll just get rid of the. Oh, we don't have to. double check for species richness and zoom out a little bit, some, let's say, hotspots will start to pop up. This one is, let's say, interesting. So I'll switch the underneath layer to a Google satellite and I'll lower the opacity. So you can see there is some kind of a field, right? So it's like, wait a minute, why there is a hotspot like this right here, right? That doesn't make much sense, right? It's a field. So that was a thing I was, thinking about a couple minutes ago when I was rehearsing, let's say. But then I switched to the OpenStreetMaps and look what pops up. Here is natural reserve. It's basically a biodiversity hotspots by its own because it's the natural reserve. And this is more or less how we can evaluate if the maps are correct. If we move a little bit here to the other hotspot, we can say or see the same stuff here, right? If I would just lower it again, like here is the natural reserve and kind of a biodiversity hotspot as well. You can check for the, presence of invasive species and so on and so on. And the last thing I would like to show is how this can be used. It is, let's say, a little bit, hard to say how people can use it. We already have a couple different scenarios that we discussed with, decision makers and so on. One of the things how you can use it. So if you have, let's say, a tree species richness, you can predict already hotspots for fire hazards. This is the same for the species. But the one which I like is, so if you, let's say, are a city planner or someone like that. Wait, I'll rather start. Oh, wait, tree species richness. Go away. Cool. Google satellite. Yeah. So if you are a city planner and you want to expand the city, right? You're a mayor or someone like that. You have a couple options to expand the city, right? You have some spots here, you have some spots here, you have some spots here. So what we do or what we allow is to draw kind of a polygon. And right away, you can see if there are some endangered or vulnerable species present at the location. If there are, you are in a big trouble, let's say, because state and the ecologists will ruin your life. But if you, draw another one, you can see, here's only one vulnerable species, right? So it's not that the big deal. I can also check which are the species and where are the species, right? So see, for this particular one, it is here. If I was check the other one, it's more or less here, which shows me like, I could actually do something here or there. And if I would draw something, let's say here, there are none, right? So in this case, I'm pretty safe to, expand here rather than here or there. So that's, again, like subjectively, one of my favorite uses of the tool. Apart from that, if we produce the maps, and we are working on it every quarter, we can then find and see some shifts in the not just the how the cities develop, but also how it impacts the presence of the vulnerable and critically endangered species. That's more or less all from the presentation or the demo of the GeoPlant. Do you have any questions? Anyone?
I see a hand up. Just a second. All right.
Oh,
I think I've just hit allow to talk.
Yeah, let's see. Am I audible?
Yep.
Oh,
yes.
excellent. It's interesting. I'm still curious about the dealing with the sparse data, especially like when you mentioned invasive species. I know like here there will be campaigns to remove invasive species from certain parks. And so then, like, is there a way after such, a years long effort to update the data so that the observations aren't there? But then would that cause things to be predicted elsewhere that, oh, well, I guess there aren't invasive species in these locations that look like this, and therefore, part of me, I'm just starting to think about the interaction between a predictive model and active actions, and wonder if you've had any experiences along those lines.
Yeah, and you are from
I live in
which?
California.
Okay, cool, cool. I spoke with a couple of folks from US and California, and so one of the reasons why there are forest fires or fires in California is because people are planting invasive species. And then they burn pretty well, not how it was, 100 years ago. And they usually plant them because they are easy to take care of, or can handle the whole heat, let's say. So that brings us back, or me, to the prevention from the forest fires. The other thing could be, yeah, like you should probably teach people to act responsibly, right? Like we all know that when they bring rabbits to Australia, it didn't went pretty well, and people shouldn't do the same with plants. However, they do. To be fair, majority of them are houseplants, right? So one of the biggest biodiversity hotspots in France is actually Paris, right? Let's see, but it's definitely Paris, right? It will light pretty bright. Uh, it should be somewhere here. Oh, is it not lighting as I was expecting? Interesting. Interesting. I would bet it was like that before. Um, but it seems that we moved or we updated the model on the front end. So just to be clear, we removed from the training the house plants basically, because then you get more natural information about the biodiversity, and we also lower the presence information, or expected presence probability much lower for the cities than to the suburbs and outskirts of the cities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I was curious about how you deal with updates, and that's another sort of example of how to deal with weird cases. I mean, it would seem like ultimately you'd want a model that would learn that, oh yeah, houseplants in cities doesn't predict diversity of um, more native species.
Oh yeah. But that brings us back to the training and the way how we actually work with the data, right?
Yeah, so do you take observations from the I forget what the app was or the plant something
Yeah, yeah,
and
PlantNet. Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah,
regularly update.
yeah. So with the whole PlantNet situation, so we do have something like 4 billion observations. Um, the maximum we can get a day was like 2 millions. However, you can imagine majority of the data you get is what you don't need. It's like rubbish, right? It's either people photographing their house plants or photographing still like always the same species all over again. The most common one. And you usually have like those heavy long tail distributions where top 100 species out of the 10,000 cover 95% of the whole observations or all the 5 billion points. So we do have to filter and clean the data a lot. But yes, we are doing updates and updates and updates. And for the following version I'm currently working on, we will have 15,000 species, uh, 500 presence absence surveys. So it's like 5 times more of those, ground truth observations, and around 50 million uh, observations from the humans from the app.
Thanks.
Cool. So I'll move back to the presentations or to the presentation. Anyone else with a question? Seems no one, so I'll just move forward. Okay, so what we do, I told you about it already. Just a short recap. We take all the data we can get, we feed it into a model, and the goal is for any given location predict assemblages of species that are supposed to be present. So the problem itself is multi-class, multi-label classification, let's say, with multimodal data. Um, the pipeline itself is relatively simple. We do have all of those data around the Europe. Those are the real observations from the users merged with the presence absence data. And for each of the locations, we take the present and not present species. We extract the data inputs or data for the model. We feed it and optimize it with binary cross entropy. There are other ways how to do it and how to work with it, but the binary cross entropy is the most effective and used at this point. We are just optimizing for the multi-class, multi-label prediction. How then we run the inference?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So is it literally just binary cross entropy? You're treating the present only annotations as if they were present absence annotations?
Let's say yes, but not at the same time. I mean, since it's not present, you can. I don't know how to explain it right away. The reasoning behind it. But there are like multiple approaches to do it, or maybe just can you repeat the question? Maybe I just mistaken something.
So, you have you've got a small amount of present absence data, but you have a much larger amount of data where you have only presence only. So you don't. So if something wasn't observed there, you don't know if it's because it's not there or because it just wasn't seen.
Yes, yes.
How are you leveraging that presence only data in your loss function? Are you just treating it as if it's presence absence data, or are you doing something more sophisticated?
Yeah. So basically, it's class weighting. We know from the botanical literature that at 50 meters square, there is on average 50 species. So we basically weight those not present, let's say. So we are trying to predict always 50 or around 50 species on average.
Okay, so it's like a soft label.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So about the inference, the inference is a little bit tricky. If you divide Europe into 50 times 50 meter grid or 50 meter square grid, it's 5 billion points. First of all, you cannot fit it into any memory. And at the same time, you need to divide it into multiple, concurrent workers to process everything separately. Therefore, we divide Europe into 16,000 meta tiles of 25 kilometers square. And for each of the tile, which is processed separately, we then divide the state or country or island or whatever into the 50-meter cells. And we are also extracting the cubes or data for each of the locations and feed it the same way as while training. And that already, by that we can already predict the assemblages. To further processing and making the maps and so on, we basically store the logits directly to TIFF files where we do have a number of layers as the number of species. So in this case, it's 10,000 layers for that TIFF file. And you can imagine we have for 16,000 TIFF files with those predictions. That's why also the app I was showing was, despite we can do the, overall European scale, it's divided for faster processing into countries rather than, allowing processing of the whole. It's relatively large amount of data points because you can multiply it yourself, right? It's 5 billion times 10,000. That's the float 32, something like that. So it's super, super huge. How about the habitat distribution modeling? So you touched one thing that's the habitat distribution modeling is about, and that's the masked part. So we are taking as an input to an encoder the species names as the words, let's say, the predicted species names. We mask 15% of those, and we are training a model, which in this case is BERT, to predict which is supposed to be present within those other, available species. That's the reasoning behind is to compensate for, species not predicted, which usually happens in the SDM, right? For some locations, despite the species is present, is not present. That's the whole presence only, presence absence situation. And this kind of training helps pretty well. So basically, I do not have a graph, but without training the model, the top presented species usually directs or implies the habitat. So if you miss this one, your accuracy on the habitat level would drop from 90% to 40%, just because you missed the most common species. By training the model to, to be able to compensate for the missing species, you basically remove this kind of vulnerability, let's say. So you could ask, so how you do the tokenization? The tokenization or the tokenizer is super simple. This is, by the way, the botanist's plot, right? So you can see there is a lot of species already. So with those, we predict the species. We basically add it to the expected size, because usually we have under predicted species, and we just change the species names to numbers, and the numbers usually directly implies the species name, species itself. We also try to, because there is something called taxonomy. It's like a tree structure or graph structure, graph structure about the phenology of the species. And we also try to split the genus and species level into separate tokens, let's say, but didn't perform that well. Then just sliced, sentence embeddings are, fed into relatively small, again, fully connected network, and we can train on, the classifier on that directly. That's more or less from like a very fast perspective about the modeling part of the GeoPlant net. So I think it's a time for additional set of questions if you have.
Floor is open. So while we wait for other people to type up their questions, have you thought about other sources of data to incorporate into this model?
In what sense?
I mean, there's a lot of geospatial data out there. Are you? I may have missed this, but are you using elevation data at all?
Oh yeah, we do. I mean, it's so many data, so it's hard to mention everything. If I will go back into this part, the elevation is part of this one. What I think I will talk about it later, but this is, let's say, like image dimension. Despite in the current version, we have 6 bands here, not RGB near, but we also have SWARE and SWARE 2, and we also include elevation and those kind of things, or soils and those kind of information. But we are working on it. I can show you then some interesting weights and biases reports I have on this topic, because despite when you train, imagine just the encoder for this, let's say, satellite branch. There is this like redundancy, right, between the different modalities, and I was increasing the number of layers here and adding more and more and more and more and different combinations and so on. And despite the performance of this model increased a lot, the performance of the full model didn't. And that's because this data was already here or here, more or less.
Gotcha. So have you tried to measure like which ones are the most, the relative importance of each of the inputs?
Yeah. And again, I did the kind of empirical way to doing it, and I combine all of them together and did like leave one out, leave two out approach. And yeah, that's what I did. Wait, I'll probably, if you don't mind, I will grab the or show the. Oh, wait a second. Apparently the weights and biases, they don't want to work now.
No worries.
But I'll try to pull it after if you are still interested. It's an interesting wait, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. No. What the heck? I don't know why, but I cannot find it. I'll do it later, maybe.
No worries.
Oh, anything else?
Not seeing any other questions, so.
Okay, cool. So I'll move forward and tell you more about the data and different approaches we tried for the SDM, because the SDM, let's say, is kind of a backbone of the whole pipeline, because without the SDM and proper species assemblages predictions, you cannot have, despite the model is trained to work on, semi-supervised fashion, it is pretty important part. We've seen this one already, so I'll just skip and show you what is the span of the data. So you've seen this part on the right. So this is the span of the presence only data. So it's like the single species reported at this one. And you can see, it covers kind of the whole Europe, makes sense. But if you would like just visualize the presence absence data, it looks like this, which means a majority of the Europe is not covered by it. So that's kind of a bummer. And yes, then the question could be, how you compensate for that? And again, it's a huge issue, a fundamental problem for the species distribution modeling that everyone is trying to solve, let's say. Despite it looks like it's everywhere, if you look at a single species, it looks like this. And here, the scale is not here. I'll probably make the scale visible next time. But this is like 50 kilometers. So maybe even more, maybe like 100, right? If the species is relatively rare, you have just very, very, subtle amount of the species. To measure or evaluate the robustness towards shift to different regions and so on, we also made a new test set which covers species and locations that were not in a part of the original data set. Those are the orange ones. And it's super, super interesting how the performance can drop if you train only on the presence absence and test on, let's say, the data sampled from the same distribution and same locations. compared to totally different ones. I mean, it's not surprising, right? But in general, it's an interesting comparison after all. The splitting itself is a relatively huge issue for the species distribution modeling, because what people would do or could do is, if you have observations like this, you can just randomly sample, right? And you can have like your train and validation sets, right? That's what people usually do. But you can see, right, clearly there is some kind of leakage. If you have, let's say, the 300 meters satellite image here, you can already like see the training data, which is not an optimal part. What we do instead is we split it into the 50-50, and we center everything, like the extractions are centered to this one, so there's no leakage from the grid perspective. And we do something which we called spatial block holdout, where you take some of the cells for training and some for validation. And in this fashion, you can do like a standard cross validation, right? As well, you can like make a couple faults and then do like a k-fault based validation. So about the modalities and the ways how we process the data. So we form instead of like having some time series and processing really the time series in like the standard fashion, we eventually form the data into those kind of cubes, and the processing of those is relatively fast and seems effective as well. But if you would compare those four, knowing that this is from Denmark, this is from Germany, this is from France, and this is from Switzerland, it's relatively hard to spot the differences, right? It's again like relatively subtle, differences in this one. So when I first look at this one, I was like, so it seems the climatic variables are not that informative in, let's say, the species distribution modeling. And that's what made us to think about, okay, how about other modalities, right? Like we do have other time series. We have 20 plus years of data from Landsat. So how about we use it as well? Because by getting the time series from Landsat, even when one cell is represented by 1 point, how it will look like. And I mean, it's pretty clear already. Like you can see there are much bigger differences in the way how it looks like. So the variables basically in the Landsat time series are RGB near where ones were 2, and for some cases you can already see probably not this particular one, how the city expands, and you can clearly see how it becomes little, let's say, darker in the region once they develop road or whatever. But how the model, the SDM, is like works with different modalities. So we used for a baseline couple benchmarks, or sorry, couple models based on XGBoost. I think you all know XGBoost. And it's actually something pretty well used for SDMs as well. And we did again like this, all-to-all comparison of different modalities and their use. And yeah, like clearly you can say that the location related, so it's like not GPS location, but country, geographical information about even like I'm trying to find the right word, but it's it's a geo-region basically, and it's more informative than the climate and then more than soil information and the land cover, and obviously using all is kind of the niche in this point. The other approach that people usually use, and they're using it for 20 years and works pretty well, is to use Maxent, which is maximum entropy based model. And this approach is super nice and well suited for presence only data. And it works again with tabular data, let's say, as an input, and the presence only observations. However, the computational cost, let's say, or complexity for 10,000 species is enormous, and it's not deep based, so you cannot just easily use CUDA and so on, despite there are some new approaches that we could call deep Maxent, let's say. Anyway, for 100 species or one species, this is the thing, right? And the main point is, this is each model or each deep Maxent model for one species, basically. And in our case, it totally failed. So in case where we do have, let's say, 90% AOC using XGBoost and location, we got 0 or like 60% AOC in that case, and recall of around like 12. So that was total fail. We tried it multiple times and multiple people, because we are still kind of not getting it, because the idea was it was supposed to be better baseline than the XGBoost. And all the people that tried it already, they all failed. How about the shallow SDMs I was talking about, the ResNet 6? So for the different modalities, if we train separate encoders, you can already see that the performance with the ResNet 6 is much better than in case of the XGBoost. And if you merge it the way how I describe it, which is pretty simplistic, you can get, again, much bigger information. Including the Sentinel-2 data doesn't help much at the end, because majority of the info here is already present in the Landsat. And that brings us probably back to the question, like the original question Mark got, and it's, so what's the resolution of the Sentinel-2? And I believe if we would have like 5 times 5, which is 50 times 50 meters, it would be just redundant, because we have more or less the same info here in the single value in the Landsat cube. So how would then the out of distribution or out of country performance look like? So we tested on our competition. So we are hosting competitions. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but every year we are hosting couple competitions related to the species distribution modeling, species classification, and so on. And so we made a competition last year with the test set on the left side, the yellow dots. And then we extended the test set with all of those yellow dots as well. And despite there are some teams participating last year and this year as well, so they knew everything already from last year, the performance drop was significant. So from 0.4 sample average F1, the top performing team dropped to 0.23. Why? They didn't use the PO data, or they used them just sparingly. And that was the whole reason to add the data from, the different locations where the presence absence data are not available, to push people more into like, let's explore, and gave some ideas of how to do it, right? Because the question also could be, so why you're hosting the competitions? And the answer from me would be, we want to encourage people to work on interesting problems and to potentially help us in the future to make a bit better SDM. Which more or less wraps up this this part, let's say, and brings me to the, let's say, one of the last parts, which is about the competitions, right? I told you we are hosting the competitions. We host 5 different competitions, or we hosted 5 different competitions this year for fungi recognition, individual animal recognition, SDMs, multi-label classification of plants, and audio-based classification of birds. And all of them were hosted on Kaggle, and part of the CDPR FGVC workshop. And we had thousands of participants and teams, and we gathered a couple research papers out of them. And some of the outputs or some of the methods are then usually at least tested, and if valuable, used in the production after all. So that brings me to the end, let's say, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for having me. If you're interested, we do have everything on GitHub or website or somewhere on the internet. Not everything is in a good shape. Something is on like feature branches and so on, but we are slowly moving everything to the, representative and workable versions.
All right. Thank you very much, Lucas.